Welcome to Real Estate Radio Power Investing, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate investing. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, provides you with insight and guidance from his years of experience as a successful real estate entrepreneur on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate, and much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to our Real Estate Radio Power Investing program, where we empower you with the education to maximize your investing success. We're broadcasting from the #1 business radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area, KDOW-AM 1220, the Wall Street Business Network. I'm Tom K. Wilson, your host for this weekly program on real estate investing. If you can't make the live show, you can catch our podcasts on TomWilsonProperties.com or on iTunes or on YouTube. Also, if you go to TomWilsonProperties.com, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter that keeps you posted on what's going on in real estate in the world of economics. Also, get access to our syndication products that are only available to our client base. We look forward to your questions that we can answer, any suggestions for future topics and future guests that you might like to have, and any questions you have in general about real estate, we're glad to help you with that. On the website, TomWilsonProperties.com, is a lot of investor education information on what are syndications, what's commercial property, how to pick houses, how to pick the best metros to invest in, and a lot more. This program today, we're going to be talking about commercial real estate, and we have with us a very experienced local investor and agent, Tim Tran, who is yet another engineer converted to real estate investing. He's the founder and president of the Ivy Group, commercial and investment real estate. He's been practicing real estate since 1999, currently leads the firm's real estate acquisition, disposition, and leasing and property management divisions. That's a lot of different things to cover in the world of real estate. So he's closed projects in both the public and private sectors, and he's been doing this for quite a long time as a staff of folks and got a lot of experience. So, Tim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom.
Nice to have you on. So, what is your story? How did you get from engineering over to real estate?
Well, it's actually a very interesting story. I got my bachelor degree in systems engineering, and then I went for my master's in software engineering. And one day I just said, I'm tired of being in an office, and so let me go explore what I like out there. And when I was working in engineering, I started to invest in commercial and residential properties. So I thought maybe I can turn this into a career. So how do I actually transition from engineering to real estate? Well, as you know, engineering is very math intensive, and being in the commercial field is all about numbers. So I thought that was something that I wanted to pursue, and I did that. And I started the Ivy Group 17 years ago.
So what planted the seeds? What got the concept of real estate in your head to even think about going down that path?
I may have read a book when I was younger, but when I bought my first couple properties, I learned from the best and made some money. And so I thought, hey, this is something that I like to get into because the money's good, and I wanted to change up the career path a little bit.
Why commercial rather than houses? Most people start off renting out the first house they lived in, and then it goes from there. And then, indeed, that's my story, although I had a larger vision because of how I got started. But how did you manage to be smarter than a lot of us and jump right over that starter phase?
Yeah, actually, that was a harder thing to do, was jump right into commercial. To be quite frank with you, I started out actually as an appraiser. I got my appraiser license, took a stab at that, didn't really find the niche that I like, and then I joined up with a residential firm. And again, I just kind of was just exploring at that time, and then did my first commercial deal at a residential firm, and I realized there was very little support. And so I got into commercial real estate because of that. I started my own company, set up my own process, and just kind of went along with that.
Just like those young and invincible 5-year-old boys that put skis on and they go down the diamond slope the first time, huh? You just went
That's
for it.
pretty much what it was. I made a lot of mistakes, took a lot of risks, and luckily I'd made some good money from investing in the real estate, and I used that as a kind of like the seed money to go for commercial.
Okay. What, in addition to knowing how to do the math, what kind of prior skills from your engineering career and being in the military do you think helped you most to be successful in the commercial real estate?
Growing up, I always felt that I was always a learner. I was always inquisitive, and I was always a negotiator. Didn't know that until I got into real estate, that I was always negotiating and selling. And so when I got into this field, the engineering part was easy. The negotiation part was easy, but finding the client, it turns out, was a little bit more of a challenge when you have very little experience, very little contacts. And so what I learned out of this business is, keeping in touch with people, having that personal relationship, going out there and introducing yourself is very, very important if you want to stay in this field and make a career out of it.
I have to thank my wife for teaching this engineer how to enjoy people. Now I think she's sorry she taught me, but she says I asked too many questions.
Asking questions is a good thing.
Yeah, that's how I learn the most and enjoy it as well. Mm-hmm. Good. It's I always feel that the most people undervalue and underestimate their generalist skills that they learn in their earlier life doing something entirely different, mm-hmm. and they underestimate how easily and how well you can transfer those skill sets over to a different business or product. And just like being analytical and things like that, managing people, managing projects, all of that, certainly relates well to real estate, doesn't it?
Yeah, most people will be surprised that they have skill sets that they think it's just, maybe related to just one industry. But mm-hmm. if they kind of open up their minds, they'd be really surprised in, how transferable some of those skills are. I mean, having people skills, negotiation, sale, you would think that it only involves real estate, but you can probably take that to a lot of different industry.
Indeed.
Even as an engineer, you can probably negotiate, pay raises with your boss and time off or whatever, right? Work from home. Those things are all very transferable skills.
Yep. And here we all, as a baby, everybody learns to negotiate, right? They learn what kind of sounds get responses, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, what do you think are the pros and cons of commercial real estate? What do you like about it, and what do you think's tough about it?
I think what I like about it is the fact that it's very dynamic. There's a lot of moving parts as opposed to residential. Not to say anything bad about residential, but when you do a commercial deal, you got to deal with zoning, you got to deal with traffic, you got to deal with investment criteria. Is very, very specific. The timeline is a little bit longer than a residential deal. Even if you were to go out and get a loan for a commercial property, it takes you a little bit longer to underwrite it, and the banks are tough these days. And so, what I like about it is I learn from the best people, the best minds in the industry. Everybody has a different way of viewing a deal, and as an agent, my job is to advise them. And how do I advise them? I learn from the previous clients and say, this is what I've seen. This is what we've done. This is what some of our clients have done that are, more successful. I think the cons about it is it's a tough industry to get into. There's a lot of good, smart people that's been around. There's a lot of bigger companies that's, have a well-established name. So as an independent boutique company, you got to kind of break into that barrier. And again, the other con is I think it's a long cycle in terms of, a closing. Again, a lot of different moving parts. A lot of times we're doing a deal right now in Santa Clara. It's an industrial warehouse. We got to deal with environmental issues. We got to deal with contractors, architects. The city's got to input in terms of what they want to see. So, you put, you're like a quarterback when you do commercial. In a way, it's good, and in a way, it's very time consuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's there are a lot of different parts. It is a lot more complex. You're dealing with agencies, and the timeline is generally longer, except in this seller's market. In order to get a deal, you got to pretty much commit to something that's really tough to do time-wise, right? Mm-hmm. Or else you're not going to get the deal. And then you got to figure out how to compress all of that and make it happen in that time frame. And if you aren't willing to make that commitment and assume you can rise up to that challenge, you won't get the deal, right? So
absolutely,
it's really tough situation.
Yeah, I always advise clients, to be prepared. There's, you're looking at a property and you think it just came on the market, or maybe you sat on the market for a while. I bet you if you call that listing agent, they'll tell you, I got a lot of hits and I've already got a couple offers. So you're still competing at a certain level. So, you got to be prepared in terms of having, your paperwork ready, having your funds ready, whatever the case may be. Just be ready, because when we show you a property, you got to pretty much make a decision, within the hour or so. Otherwise, you're going to lose that deal.
Yeah. You got to. Takes a little fortitude, doesn't it?
It does, and some of the novice, newer, investors or property owners that are, doesn't understand the market here in Silicon Valley. They take their time, they make decisions, and we see it over and over again that they lose the deal because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Boy, isn't it so true, isn't it? The market is very local. There's thousands of submarkets. Mm-hmm. Each location is different. Each product asset class is different. Mm-hmm. Each price category is different. It's just amazing.
Absolutely.
How unique it is.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so we've got certainly a unique situation here. Do you also are you dealing with products in other states?
That's pretty rare. Sometimes when we deal with a client that has a need in another state, we usually refer that out. I actually belong to the CCIM network, and so there's CCIM designees all over the country. So we don't try to go and pretend like we know that market. So it's better for us to just refer it out and and pass it on along that way. I'm also a CIPS, the Certified International Property Specialist. So I have another network that we can reach out to, for out-of-state investments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is that for investing in other areas, or getting clients from other areas?
It's both. Most of the people that come to us are, two types: owner, user, and investor. So we refer it out as appropriate.
Okay. Well, we have Tim Tran with us here today in the studio, and we're talking about commercial real estate, which he has many years of experience with, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when we come back, we're going to also introduce Mike Priolo, who is also a commercial agent who will help me co-host today's program and ask Tim some tough questions. So we're going to ask him when we get back about multifam versus non-multifam. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back. Our subject today is commercial real estate. We have in studio with us Tim Tran, who is president of the Ivy Group, who has been doing commercial real estate for a long time, who jumped right over the housing, the rental house business, and went right straight into commercial, and is yet another one of those engineers who converted over to the real estate industry. And we also have in studio with us today Mike Priolo, who is the director of sales and business development at Wilson Investment Properties. And Mike is also a commercial agent and real estate. He's been in that many years. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be here.
Mike, why don't you come up with a question to grill Tim on? What would you like to know from Tim?
So, Tim, you mentioned that you have 5 agents with you at the Ivy League. Do you guys have a primary focus? You guys multifamily or triple nets or commercial and multifam? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
The 5 agents, they actually each have their core specialty in terms of asset class and also area. We've done everything from office, industrial warehouse, to retail, to restaurants, to vacant land, to multifamily apartments. The last couple of years, we've done quite a few investments for help our buyers buy apartments, multifamily. The market has been really hot. There's a shortage of properties to rent, and so investors are picking up properties. They're putting money into the property and turning it around. And we have one client that basically started investing in commercial multifamily properties about 6 years ago, and he's built up a 700 unit portfolio.
Wow.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. So what do you do more business in multifam or non-multifam? And by the way, for our listeners, sometimes it's quite confusing, the word commercial. A lot of people think commercial just means non-multifam, but the true term includes that. So we'll try to be careful when we're talking about that today. But in the whole commercial umbrella, how much is your demand of your clients for multifam versus non-multifam commercial?
I would say our multifam is probably about 30 to 40% of our transaction volume. I would say 2 to 3 years ago was super, super hot. Things have leveled off a little bit. I wouldn't say it's cooling down, but it's leveled off. More properties, more multifam are actually coming on the market. And sellers are looking at this market and saying, I can get top dollar for it. So because of that, I think activity this year has slowed a little bit. More units are coming online. But from a standpoint of a commercial real estate agent, anything over 5 units is considered commercial. Now, multifamily, it is commercial property, but from a tax perspective, depreciation perspective, the IRS treats it as a residential.
Yep. So for those of you new to it, if it's residential, it's 27 and a half years for multifam, just like it is on houses. But if you do non-multifam commercial, it's 39 years, and tenant improvements are 15 years on appreciation. So it's a little bit different, but you still get that tax sheltering benefit.
That's right. That's correct.
What do you like about commercial versus multifam? I think, well, first of all, what I find is with our clients, more of them think they want multifam than commercial. Mm-hmm. And my sense is that it's because they have the perception that they understand it better, because everybody rents a place or lives somewhere, or they've had rental houses. And yet multifams are a lot more complex to own, buy, manage than people realize. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. You've got the complexity of tenants moving in and out all the time. You got a lot of turnover in multifam versus, let's say, a retail or an office building. Most of the people that invest in multifam comes from the residential investment world, so they're used to buying a house, renting it out to a tenant, and so multifam is actually a very easy transition for them to get into. Mm-hmm. But it does have its own challenges and rewards as well. When you have a 100-unit apartment, you got 3 vacant units. You're still pretty much full. Versus, if you buy a commercial building that's got 3 units and all 3 tenants move out, you're at 100%, vacant. So there's a lot of these different things. Management is actually a big aspect of it. The type of buyers that buy multifamily are purely investors.
Yep, indeed. All right, so we'll come back in a moment. We'll talk a little bit more about multifam versus non-multifam commercial and what the pros and cons are, and how you have to treat them quite differently, both from an investor and from a buying standpoint. So this is Real Estate Radio Power Investing, and this is Tom K. Wilson on KDOW 1220 AM, the Wealth Business Network. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
We have with us today Tim Tran in the studio, who's president of the Ivy Group that focuses on multifam and non-multifam commercial properties here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we have Mike Priola in with us, helping me co-host, and he is the director of sales of Wilson Investment Properties. We were talking just before the break about multifam versus non-multifam. What do you like about commercial, Tim, and how does it differ from multifam?
I like commercial because it's very dynamic. It offers a set of challenges, and you feel like you always learn something. And when you close a deal, you feel very rewarded. Multifam has its own challenges. Most of the people that buy multifam are purely investors versus, if I'm looking at an office building or a warehouse, it could be an owner-user. So the mindset's a little different. The kind of money that you can get from a bank from a lending perspective is a little different. The rate of return that you're looking at for a multifam versus, let's say, a retail shopping center is very different as well. So a lot of different aspects.
And how would you classify that? As you say different, how different?
Different in terms of, maybe I'm looking at a multifam and I'm looking to build a portfolio and I'm looking to sell the entire portfolio, let's say 5 or 10 years down the line. If I was a retail investor, for example, I may be looking at this and I might have to consider the cyclical nature of retail business. Restaurant, for example, a lot of turnover in our industry in terms of restaurant. But if you look around, there's very little restaurants that's for sale. So how do you actually get into a space? If you want to open a restaurant or maybe on your 9th or 10th restaurant, how do you actually get into that market?
So for our listeners, returns are first level or of screening is on cap rates, and cap rates are the percent return you'd get in the first year if there were no loan on the property. So that's kind of the main yardstick that we use to evaluate properties around the country and between different asset classes. So right now in the Bay Area, Tim, what kind of cap rates are you seeing on Class A multifam and Class A retail office and so forth?
That's a big range. For example, yesterday we just listed a property, retail property on Fremont Boulevard. It's 6,200 square foot. We priced it at a 4.7% cap rate. It's got 6 tenants. Multifam, we were seeing stuff as low as 3.8, 3.9% cap rate. And then I would say it's probably gone back up right now. If you're lucky. Because
there's more on the market.
There's more on the market.
More
sellers are a little bit more realistic. There's a lot more options from the buyer's perspective. So I would say if you're lucky and you're looking for a Class A, multifam, if you can see something around the 5.5% cap, jump on that.
Because that's not typical.
That's very, very rare.
4 might be more typical.
4 is more typical. 4.5 is okay. But if you see, and cap rate, by the way, as a seller, you want a low cap rate. As a buyer, you want a high cap rate because it has an inverse relationship to price.
Indeed.
Right.
And for Class B, how much better cap rate do you get here in the Bay Area for Class B versus a Class A?
You might get another half basis point, but that requires you to put in a little bit of money to improve the property. You got to
go more CapEx usually.
Absolutely. But if you do it right, you can turn it around and get a good return on that in a very short amount of time, within a year.
Mm-hmm. As long as the market's still going up.
As long as the market has a demand for it, that's right.
And therein lies one of those secrets, would you say, crystal ball aspects of real estate investing. We have Tim Tran with us today, the president of the Ivy Group, in here talking to us about multifam commercial from his experience in buying and selling, representing buyers and sellers a lot in over since what, 99?
Since like 1999.
For quite a while.
Yeah.
Another engineer that finally saw where the better deals were. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
We have with us today in studio Tim Tran, very experienced commercial real estate broker and agent, and we're talking about that product class. And we have with us also Mike Braiolo, also experienced commercial agent. Mike, what else should we ask Tim?
Yeah, Tim, as you had mentioned, commercial real estate is very dynamic, and I totally agree with you. And as with the industry, every investor has their own criteria as well. In speaking with your clients, where do you typically recommend them to invest? What kind of product types and or geographies?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have two type of investors that we work with. Some of them are really savvy, very experienced, and there's some investors that are kind of new to the market. Personally, I always advise that they keep it in the Bay Area. Why? Because capital flows here, even though prices are high, but you're always going to have that demand. There's great universities, there's great companies, there's always people moving here, which means eventually prices are, always going to hold steady or go up. Overall, I like the Bay Area. We starting to have investors that starting to look into the, Fresno, Stockton market and Sacramento market. I don't have a whole lot of experience in that area. Prices are pretty attractive out there, but then again, long-term wise, what happens when the market tanks? Because we know a cycle will happen. It's just a matter of when. And if you're holding a property out in Stockton, and unless you have an exit strategy, that might come at you pretty fast if the market starts to turn. So
I have clients who are new to the area, and if the market's shifting, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you mean it doesn't just stay like this all the time?" I tell them, "I'm watching cycle number 5."
And that's right.
1969, I was told that it was all over.
Yeah. And during the last cycle, we were hit pretty hard too in the Bay Area, and depending on which city you're talking about, anywhere from 30 to 40%. But the really great thing was when the market turned around, it turned around a lot faster. And if you're looking at, let's say, Brentwood or somewhere even out there that's still relatively close to the Bay Area, there's still properties that are still just kind of lingering. So my preference is,
you like the core economic centers.
I like the core, whether you're an investor or a novice. The core is always going to do you well over the long term. Okay.
Talk to us a little bit about non-multifam asset classes, office versus neighborhood service retail versus power centers versus warehousing. What asset classes do you like, and what are a couple of the main advantage of each of those classes?
It all depends on the investor. Personally, we've done a lot of business in the office sector and as well as the retail sector. I would say if you have a long-term vision in terms of retail, if you look at what's happening, most of the buyers are going online. If you look at what's happening with Macy's and all these big companies, Best Buy, they're all downsizing or they're getting rid of their stores. I just saw this morning Gymboree is looking to close like 359 stores. So over a long-term horizon, if you're a retail investor, what do you need to do if you're going to be investing in retail, right? What we've seen, the trend nowadays is, most retail centers that are thriving or more centered around a theme or a lifestyle. Look at Santana Row, hugely successful. Why? Because there's all kinds of things that you can do there.
It's a destination.
It's a destination. People want to go there. Out of town people go there because that's what they want to see.
Yep. And our experience is that also we like neighborhood service retail. Y'all always hesitate in even using the word retail anymore because it scares everybody because the headlines are all negative. But, best I can tell, you still got to go to a place to get a sandwich or a beer or get your dog seen by the vet or get your hair done. Yeah, those are things you can't get done online.
Right. And the neighborhood retail serves that purpose. It caters to the residents that live in that area, and maybe to a certain extent some companies, they go out and grab lunch or whatever the case may be. But that's changing as well. When you go into a neighborhood retail center, the rent is lower, but the traffic is a little bit, less intensive versus, something that's anchored by a national tenant.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. But yet in the face of all this, when most people from the headlines would have guessed that all brick and mortar is going to be scraped from the face of the earth in the next few years, here we have the leading e-commerce company in the world buys was it 460 Whole Food stores. Pretty interesting, isn't it? So it's I think what we learn is it's not a singular answer, and there's synergy between different things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think after this deal closes with Amazon and and Whole Foods, it'd be interesting to see how people shop.
Yeah.
How do people buy the groceries?
Yep.
I mean, right now, personally, I like to go in and touch the fruits and taste samples. But when you're online, that's a different shopping experience.
Yeah. And most people still like try on clothes, and if it's an artist, they like to go to Michael's and feel, touch and see the materials. And so I think, I can't believe we're going to have no stores left, right?
Yeah,
it's a matter of what kind of stores.
That's right. Yeah. Or if you're like my wife, you buy everything online, you try it on at home, and if you don't like it, you return it.
and then I bet often she'll buy something when she's at the store and she's picking it up. Right?
That's right. She's like, I got credit, so I can use this credit. So that's where the trend is going.
Do you deal in industrial some? Do you like industrial?
We do quite a few industrial. Industrials are very specific in terms of building height, loading docks, roll-up doors, power requirements. That market is very, very specific. A buyer or owner-user has a very certain specific requirement set that you have to meet.
So if you have an industrial with single tenant, what do you look for, or what's your advice to folks that are looking at a single tenant deal? As
an investment? I would say make sure the tenant is a strong tenant, preferably something with corporate guarantee. And if you're buying it as an investment, make sure there's annual increases, make sure the expenses are kept to a minimum. And, overall, you want to see a strong tenant in there if you want to get your money out of that property.
And a great lease and a long lease.
Great lease, long lease always help.
Yep. That's we like them too.
Yeah.
We have Tim Tran here in the studio today, and talking about commercial real estate, both multifam and other asset classes. So when we come back, we'll ask him to tell us his thoughts, his crystal ball guesses to where the market's going. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Oh, what a good program we've had today, and talking to Tim Tran about commercial real estate and his experience locally here in Bay Area. Often when we talk about commercial real estate, we're talking to guests and topics that involve other areas in the country. There's a lot of commonality, but then there are uniquenesses too. So Tim, for a little wrap up here, I know everybody hates doing it when Chief Economist Dr. Doug Duncan says he slips up and gives a prediction. If he gets it right, he tries not to act surprised. but if so, what do you think's happening here in the market? Certainly, the impending potential recession is an increasing threat. And what's your crystal ball guess? What's going to happen?
That's always a tough question. We get asked that question almost every day. Where do you think the market's going? What I see is the market is peaked, or maybe already has peaked. Interest rates, even though they have risen since Trump came into office, are still slowly rising. You can get a good loan from the bank. I think the unemployment is very low right now. And there's employers looking to fill jobs that it's hard to find. Overall, I would say, depending on who you talk to, you maybe have 1 or 2 or 3 years left on the cycle before we start to see a downturn. What's interesting is we're starting to see a lot of sublease in the market, whether it's office or industrial warehouse. That's a sign that something's changing. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's a sign. And if you speak to a lot of different agents and brokers, they'll tell you a sublease is a sign that things are declining. And
what asset class or classes do you think are still maybe expanding, or have or will be the longest before they start to soften? Is it industrial? Is it multifam? Is it office? Where do you think?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, the first to probably drop is probably going to be retail because, again, of the cyclical nature of the type of tenants that you have in those kind of space.
Yep.
I think office users and multifamily are going to probably hold pretty steady. Again, if you're looking at, let's say, vacant land, that's always a different animal. That's a different story. And so you got to have a purpose if you're going to buy, a vacant parcel to develop on it. If you look at how long it takes to get your permits and approval and architect and engineering and different study, it's about a 6 to 12 month cycle. And then after you build it, it's another, 6 to 12 months. So 2 years from now, you got to look at the market and say, I have a product, can I sell it?
Well, it's amazing how different these different asset classes are. We appreciate you bringing us your insight today, Tim, and for being on the program. What's the website for the Ivy Group?
www.ivycommercial.com. ivycommercial.com.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. You gave us a lot of insight, and look forward to probably having you back on the show again. So thanks for tuning in today on Real Estate Radio Power Investing. And also, don't forget to go sign up on TomWilsonProperties.com for their newsletter to get access to syndication deals in the multifamily commercial arena, mostly outside the California area. If you want to buy or sell a property here in the Bay Area, Tim would be a good resource to consider. But thanks for being with us today. And we'll look forward to having you back and listening to our next segment and our next guest. Remember, the only thing that matters is what you do next.